I genuinely feel like Eleven's character and any character development that she developed over the course of the entire show was utterly ruined in the course of just a few episodes, honestly, in the finale. It was very disappointing as a longtime fan of Elle, but I really want to talk about why the choices they made were so bad for her as a character. So, first, let's talk about season 1 and 2 because this develops a sort of framework for how they're going to navigate her character, right? Because Elle, at first, she doesn't really understand or know anything about human society. It's Mike that brings Elle in, he gives her a place to stay. He teaches Elle what it means to be a friend. He gives Elle like a sense of normalcy in the world that not even Elle had developed yet. It was always based on Mike. Elle's existence and the role she had in society was defined by Mike. The scene where Mike gets her the wig and the dress honestly defined this very heavily because it showed that the role Elle had in society, it was always going to be corroded or defined even by what Mike wanted of her. So when Mike brought Elle to the snowball, that completely, illustrated how their relationship was pointed towards Mike's desires and what Mike saw fit of Eleven. Because Eleven was literally down to be a family member to Mike. But it was Mike, of his own accord, who decided to bring Elle to the snowball and sort of like flaunt her around. It was for sort of the guise of others in a way because Mike wanted to bring her to this big social event. And Elle doesn't even know what a snowball is, right? It was of Mike's own accord. So it sort of became a precedent that Elle wouldn't really be able to make her own decisions and that her role in society would still be dependent on Mike's wishes. So season 3 was a complete upheaval of this narrative, and it gave Elle a true sense of character development. Because that whole, episode with Elle and Max at the mall completely changed how Elle viewed the world. Because Elle had gained a friend who wanted Elle to make her own decisions. She wanted to help her make her own decisions. She didn't really want to interfere, but she wanted to give Elle the opportunity to find out what it was that she liked, what it was that she wanted to do. Like, Elle didn't even know what type of clothes she liked to wear or what flavor of ice cream she liked to eat before she met Max. And she knew how to kiss Mike before she got to explore herself, which was very telling of the sort of control Mike wielded on Elle, and it demonstrated a struggle for agency. So when Mike told Elle that he felt jealous of her relationship with Max and he saw girls as a whole different species, it was honestly very telling of how he had an idealized version of Elle as a superhero who he brought into society, and he always wanted her to listen to him. So for Elle to finally gain a sense of rejection of that, it was very, very pivotal to her character. And that brings us to season 4, which added a new level of complexity. Because although Elle had gained a sense of agency in the relationship, she was still very poised towards Mike and Mike's approval. And this was the reason that she lied to Mike. She lied about being popular. She lied so she could live up to the idealized version of reality that Mike sort of had for her. Because Elle, she didn't even really understand like what being popular and what all that meant. But she put on that act for Mike. She, made it seem like she was friends with Angela and she always went to the skate ring. And I think that's why she reacted so horribly when Angela treated her like that at the skating rink. And I don't disagree or agree necessarily with how Elle reacted, but I think that it was definitely because of Mike and what she thought Mike would think about her if he found out that, Elle didn't really live this amazing life as a popular girl. So when Elle hit Angela and, Mike reacted almost as if Elle was a monster, oh yeah, I hated Mike since then. And I hated how Elle cared about Mike since then. Because if Mike truly did love Elle and wanted Elle to pursue her own decisions and wanted Elle to exist as her own person, why did he, portray her as a sort of monster in the situation? Like, he was so, I don't know, devastated that Elle didn't live up to his fantasy of her as a superhero. He was more in love with his idealized version of Elle as a superhero than he was in love with Elle. And that brings us to why he couldn't say I love you to Elle. And why did Elle, react so negatively to that? Why did she still care so much about Mike's validation? I really wish that they explored her rejection of Mike's validation this season, but they didn't. When it came to the scene in the void, Elle was like, "Oh, Mike, I really hope one day you can understand my decision." Why are we brought back to Mike being the one who has to understand your decision? Why? Why wasn't it Hopper or Max you had that conversation with? Why do you want approval from Mike again? And why was nothing ever done with that plot line? Season 4 had the perfect setup for exploring the dynamic between Elle and Mike and how, maybe they weren't really meant to be. But for them to also in the epilogue have Eleven's fate proposed by Mike pissed me all the way off. Because just a few episodes ago, Elle literally told Mike, "You don't get to write the story this time. It's not your ending." Because, it's her decision now. What Mike expects of her or wants from her, it doesn't matter. Even if Elle was making a bad decision or a good decision, I think the decision to kill her off was bad. But for Elle to be dependent on Mike's acceptance was the worst thing that they could have done with her character. And for Mike to again try and decide her fate was one of the worst things they could do with her character. But I think above all, the whole suicide plotline this season was a very sort of slap on the face type of storyline. Because for Elle to not even combat Callie and her sentiment that the only way, things would be good is if Elle killed herself, for Elle to not even combat that by, saying how much good she's done, how many people she's helped, how many people she's saved, for her to not even have a monologue about how she's made a good impact on the world, how she's done her best to try and help others. For no exploration of that, and for Elle to not even talk about the relationships and the bonds that she formed, for her to give in so easily to this narrative that Elle's suicide was the only way, it was horrible storytelling, especially when you look at the story that she's developed as a character the whole past 4 seasons. For it to be minimized into a suicide plotline, it is almost infuriating. I think if you're a fan of Elle, this was the worst possible ending because they ruined Elle as a character. It was so questionable even why they sidelined Elle from the start. I mean, I was happy to see Will and Mike get character development, but for them to, 360 on that and bring it back to Elle, but only for Elle to kill herself, Volume 2 onwards, I don't even see it as real anymore. It was such a bad ending for her character. And to reduce a victim of trauma and abuse to needing to break that cycle, and the only way that she could break that cycle was to kill herself, really, I think if any character deserved a happy ending, it should have been Elle. Why is this the message we want to send?